So, again, welcome to today's session on lots of different interesting topics pertaining to digital citizenship. And part of that information that we'll be discussing related to the 9 elements of digital citizenship, we'll touch on some of the various areas of digital citizenship that relate to intellectual property, like copyright, plagiarism, and so forth, which can be a part of different areas like digital ethics, digital law, that kind of thing. So, really good information today. And if you did not already watch the Global Go To session, or if you haven't attended a Global Go To session, make sure that you check out the archive on the community discussion board. I posted that a couple of hours ago there. So 2.4 grades are in for the most part. There is one group in one of my classes. Remember, I have 2 DGL classes, so you guys may see students, in these sessions from the other class. So one group was not did not give me the teammates' names. So I need to have that as soon as possible so that I know it was actually Team C, and I can't remember which class it was, but check if you are on Team C and you don't see a grade for 2.4, then that means I need a list from your team leader as to who the participants were, and that can just be posted on the 2.4 discussion forum. So please make sure that that gets done as soon as possible because I have it graded, but I don't know who all participated, so I can't assign that grade yet. So again, check if you were on Team C. That doesn't pertain. If you're on Team A or B, you have received a grade at this point, so make sure you check for your feedback. All right. So today, and one last mention, reminder, as far as due dates go, that your 3.4 discussion post is due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. So be creative with that and come up with an interesting scenario where you're talking about different digital tools and communications and the elements of digital citizenship in a creative, it's obviously part fiction and creativity based on true, real scenarios. Prohibition, indeed, of course, was a real thing. So be creative with that. Have fun with that discussion. 3.4. It's a lot lighter than last week's topic, but you're still looking into the elements of digital citizenship and aspects of digital literacy. So do come up with a creative scenario that explains how those things may have been used and how those events might have been different if they were around at that period in time. Okay, so and you can make up a story if you want, even like a creative story. That's fine, as long as you're creative with it. That's a good thing. Okay, so Joshua is asking in the text box if you have to refer to the historical event. Yes, you do. I don't get to choose the topics, so you are relating it to prohibition. Now, you could take a different stance on that. So you could look at it from the perspective of law enforcement, for example, or the perspective of um, clergymen or anybody, any perspective. So really, however, whatever perspective, it won't be. Yeah, that would be fine too, Joshua. The ones who were enjoying what was illegal a little too much, that's fine. So whatever perspective you want, there's no right or wrong as far as that goes. You can definitely have fun with it and be creative. Just the idea here is the exploration of different digital citizenship elements and tools and how they would have been used in this time or how it would have impacted things differently. Okay, so we are talking about, yeah, absolutely. Facebook and websites would be good tools to mention for it. Any kind of digital communications. Um, think GPS, for example. Think smartphones. Think, let's see, what other kind of devices might there be? Well, think of devices law enforcement might have, for example, or even technology when it comes to distribution. Yeah, CCTV. I mean, the list is really endless. Tasers. Yeah, there you go. So this ought to be interesting. So you do have until 11:59. You're welcome tonight to get that initial post in. So make sure you've got your initial post in. You can always expound on that initial post. You know, you can always add to it later. I'm fine with that. But do make sure you have some kind of post in this evening that pertains to the topic. And remember that you need to have at least 3 replies done by this Sunday. So that's all we really have for reviewing information, because everybody seems to be really keeping up with the materials this month, which is great. Must be some New Year's resolutions must be still working, because overall, my 2 classes this month, they're really doing a good job, which is awesome. So we're going to talk about the different elements of, yeah, that does sound good. We're going to talk about the different elements of portions of the 9 elements of digital citizenship today. And the moral operating system part of it and that kind of thing, we're going to save for next week, because that ties into next week's curriculum. So today will be broken up into 2 parts. Part 1 today, and then we'll cover part 2 of this session next week, because that goes into the bringing it all together topics of next week. And yes, Troy, all initial posts are typically always due by Wednesday. In most classes, that will typically be the case with discussion posts, unless you have something that's a little bit different, like a collaborative project like we had last week for 2.4. And of course, those dates were different because we needed to incorporate the extra time in for everybody to work with the teams and to be able to get the posts, and then have Team C in the debate fashion follow up. So, but otherwise, the majority of the time that you're at Full Sail, your posts initially for your discussion boards will be due on Wednesday, and then your replies will be due on Sunday. Now, it also varies with, each class, each instructor, what they expect. So like in DGL, we want you guys to get into good habits, and you have to post, 3 replies to get the maximum grade. 2 replies can get you a good grade, a very good grade, don't get me wrong, but to maximize your grade, you want those 3 reply posts, and that can vary. So make sure you always pay careful attention to each class, each class's requirements and your instructor's specific requirements, because those things, will vary a little bit from class to class. But on a general rule, most instructors I know typically have their initial post due by Wednesday and replies due by Sunday. And most of the time it's 2 replies, but for this class, it's 3. Yeah, you're welcome. So it says, okay, so that's a good question, Troy. There are 2 discussion forums that have no grade weight associated to them in DGL. You won't see that in all the classes, but you see that in DGL. Now, in different classes, you might have an activity, but it's not actually posted on the discussion board, so you might not be collaborating with other people, and that might not be graded, or it might be part of a larger project. So it's part of the curriculum in DGL, so you have to complete it in order to have your participation grade intact and to learn all of the curriculum. But you don't actually you do get a grade, but it funnels into your participation grade. It doesn't go into the other main part of your grade. Okay. So that's how that works, but it is required that you complete all of those non-graded discussions as well as graded discussions. Anything that you see on the dashboard has to be completed. And you should use that, as a rule of thumb in all of your classes, because obviously, the material's there because it's integral to the class. So make sure you always complete those. And then after you're done, make sure you always click that I've completed this activity button, because if you don't do that, that shows up as being incomplete after it closes out on your instructor's dashboard. And you certainly don't want that to happen, because then you automatically get assigned a 0, and it would be up to the discretion of your instructor if they wanted to adjust that. Now, in my case, it's the first month, and I'll go in and adjust it if you forget, but you don't want that 0 there to begin with, right? So always remember to click that I've completed this activity button. You're welcome. Okay, so we're going to look at some interesting information that pertains really to everybody. And regardless, I know a lot of you are looking to be in creative entertainment type or technology based either roles as a professional or creating your own business or working in that type of industry, or maybe already are. So intellectual property and protecting our own work is very important, but it's also really important for anybody. I mean, anybody, because we all have to adhere to these things. And a lot of people, of course, aren't aware of these types of laws and regulations when it comes to intellectual property. So we're going to talk about these topics here today, and it's obviously we have the ability to go out on the internet, right? Digitally, we can pretty much access anything we want to these days, but that doesn't mean that we should be able to, or that we can't. I mean, we can, but that doesn't mean that we're allowed to, right? So just because you have access to something doesn't mean that it's okay to download it or to use it. So different things can come into play, like plagiarism or copyright infringement, if someone takes media and uses it and they're not supposed to, or if someone takes some kind of information and they use it and they don't cite it. So that's another reason we talk about research and citations and making sure you're citing your work and using tools like Diigo to do that heavily in digital literacy, because we want you guys to get on the right foot. It's really important because you all are creating different materials and putting them out there. So you want to be aware that you're doing that correctly and that you wouldn't be in a situation later. Likewise, you don't want anybody, of course, using your work, right, without your permission either. So it works both ways for sure. Okay, so copyright, as a part of these elements of digital citizenship, it's a form of protection, and it's grounded in the U.S. Constitution and granted by law for original, fixed works and a tangible medium of expression. So different types of works are protected in the U.S. by the U.S. Constitution, by law, and those works would be examples of them that you see here on the screen. And it protects you if you create something, right? So if you create something and somebody uses it without your permission, then they've infringed. That's copyright infringement if they don't get your permission. Now this happens all the time. People do it all the time, and a lot of times people do this unknowingly. A lot of times people do something like this and they don't even realize that they're doing it. We used to see a lot of this when materials, multimedia was first available on the internet in a mass form. Does anybody know what I'm talking about here, what I'm thinking about specifically? Where people were downloading things like music. Yes, absolutely. So Napster, yeah, that's what I was thinking of. And movies too, but yeah, Napster was what was in my mind, because people were doing that, right? And they were just, oh, wow, this is awesome. All of a sudden I can go and get all these cool songs and things for free instead of paying, $21 a piece or so for a CD. Now I can just download them from the internet. And yeah, a lot of these services got shut down, or they had to modify the way that they did business because, in fact, those services were in violation of copyright laws, because you can't just go and do that. So not only were the organizations in violation of copyright laws, but also the consumers or the people who were going on there and downloading those things were also in violation. So, we're having more awareness from people these days about this type of practice. Yes, guilty. That's right. So people can get fined and all kinds of things. It's not a good thing. This is something that people should not be doing. So again, just because we have the ability to go take some materials doesn't mean that we are allowed to. or that we should. So copyright covers both published and unpublished works. So in other words, if you create something on your computer and you don't submit it to the Copyright Office, you don't actually, or you don't actually publish it, it's still protected. The U.S. Copyright Office does protect your materials regardless of if you actually register them or not. So the minute that you start creating something, it's protected. Now, here's the thing. That can be very gray, right? Because what if you worked on it with a partner? Yes, very good to know, Miguel. Or what if you did it during work, for example? So there could be a lot of gray areas. So registering something to protect yourself is the best thing to do. Or what if somebody got to it, and took it from you? Like maybe you're working on a public computer and left it, or somebody hacked into an account of yours, or you put a sample of it on YouTube and somebody used it, right? Well, so these things can be gray. So if you really want to protect yourself, considering licensing it through the Copyright Office would be a good idea. So that kind of, so that there's no gray area in those cases. The other thing is that, there's digital trails these days, right? Remember how we talked about metadata yesterday and how there's data about data and so forth. So in a case where it would need to really be looked into, like with a lawsuit, they can track lots of things, that, but maybe some of that information is missing. So best to protect yourself up front if you feel like it's something that maybe might be a revenue stream for you later on. But again, you are protected initially when you start creating something. So the use of any amount is considered infringement without permission. So in other words, there's no 8-second rule. A lot of people think, oh, well, you know what? No, I just took 8 seconds of that song or 8 seconds of that video. But that's not the case. There's no amount of material that you can use. There's no amount that you can use because you can't afford to actually use it. Well, I just used 5 seconds because I couldn't pay what the owner wanted. No, you can't use it, and that's still considered copyright infringement if you don't get permission first. So Miguel's saying that you've mailed a thumb drive with original music to yourself. So I'm assuming you mean emailing it. Or you're saying you mailed, the actual thumb drive, right? So, okay, so I see what you're saying there. So that could be some kind of trail, but probably doing it digitally might be a better option because that way, you could see the files themselves on the computer. So let's see, yeah. So did I go mute? Can you guys hear me? Okay, so that's good, Miguel. Yeah, both. Okay. All right, you guys can hear me. Okay, good. Yeah, sometimes the audio, cuts out for a moment here. Okay, good. Glad you guys can hear me again. All right, let's see. All right, so certain things can be copyrighted, like music and movies, right? And poems and written works and things like that, but certain things cannot be copyrighted. So something like a title, a short phrase, a slogan, a style, an idea or procedure, a familiar symbol or design can't be copyrighted. A lot of those things can be trademarked or they can be patented, but can't be copyrighted. So if you've got something specific that you're looking into, you would certainly want to figure out if it would be copyrighted or trademarked or patented. But typically, again, things like music, movies, poems, the written works, things like that, something that's creative in nature would usually be copyrighted. And then, but some things wouldn't even be licensed. It really depends, and it's obviously up to the office, but you would check with them, and you can always check with an attorney, and they would be able to steer you in the right direction for these things. And certain things could be part of something, like clearly, of course, you could create like a recipe book and have it as part of a book with a story and pictures and things, and that could be copyrighted, but not like a recipe, a single recipe itself, for example. Somebody's idea can't be copyrighted, but if it's part of some kind of, uh, let's say, some kind of ingredient that's for medicine or something, that would probably be patented, for example, but it'd have to be a part of something. So when we think of familiar symbols or designs, like if I mention Nike, we all know what that familiar symbol is in our mind, right? We think of that, yeah, just do it. Okay, so that would be like a slogan, right? Or a short phrase. And that would be probably trademarked. But also the actual Nike emblem, that familiar symbol on the shoe, and on all of their, on all of their materials, actually, that swoosh or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, check, swoosh, whatever. Wish they'd give that thing a name. Have they given it a name? I don't know. Probably. But anyway, we all know that in our mind. Swoosh, yeah, that's what I call it. So we all know what that is when we think of Nike. And so something like that more than likely would be trademarked versus copyrighted. Okay. So you can't again use any part of copyrighted material without permission from the owner. If you don't gain permission, then you're not allowed to use it. So let's go ahead and take a look here. We're going to stop there as far as that goes, and we'll talk about public domain forward in next week's session. But I want to show you some other things related to that. So let's take a look at the copyright.gov website. And so that's easy to remember. It's just copyright.gov. All right, so if you were interested in registering a copyright, you would come to this website because you could do it electronically. That's the fastest way to be able to do it, and I think the best way because obviously that's all tracked digitally, right, if you do it online. And let's see, and obviously a lot of your things that you'd be copywriting these days would be best in, digital format anyway. So you just click on that link, register it. It's very inexpensive to do. They make it where I know it's under $100. So they make it where the general public, can actually do it. So there's lots of information here that will give you information about copywriting if you're interested at any point in doing that. And it tells you here that the primary registration method advantages here is you can, check your status online and the fastest processing time and all of that good stuff. So it's a simple application. You can check the status of it right here. And it tells you process time for filing. Right now, this could change. So e-filing is up to 8 months, right? And then processing time for paper forms is generally up to 13. So that's a big difference in time, right? 5 months. So yeah, big difference in time. Copyright Pennsylvania, is that what you're asking? Oh, performing arts. I'm like, I don't understand because it's federal. Performing arts. I would check into this. Remember, we're just touching on this briefly as part of digital literacy. You'll learn more about that in your specific major. So it would depend, but depending on what you're doing and what your major is, it would fall into a specific category, if that's what you're asking. So like if it's music, that would fall into a specific category. And there's different types of, rights and licensing that people obtain. Like if you're playing music, for example, or performing it, you need certain kind of permission or license. So that's something that you would want, you'll learn about, as you go through in your major, depending on what your specific field is, your specific interest. Okay, so that's a website you definitely might want to check out. Absolutely. Okay. And oh, and by the way, on this website too, if you wanted to use copyrighted materials, you could actually go onto the copyright.gov website and search records. So this is where you could find out who the owner of the copyrighted material was. So if you wanted to use part of a song, for example, maybe you're making a video and you wanted to use part of that song, you could go onto the copyright.gov, search the records, find out who the author is, who the owner of that copyrighted material is, and then you could request permission from them. So certainly you'd want to keep that permission in writing and make sure you have it. And then naturally, if they say no, then you cannot use their materials. Oftentimes, obviously, there's a fee that goes along with doing this. Naturally, people want to be compensated for their talents, for their work, right? So that may be something that's either within your reach or maybe not in your reach. And we'll talk about options to utilizing public, or rather copyrighted, licensed, protected materials next week when we do part 2 of this series, and some good alternatives that you guys have if there's something that you want to use, maybe that's copyrighted and you can't afford to use it, or you can't use it. And then on the flip side of that, alternatives for you with licensing your materials, because copyright can be really strict. So you might be interested in some less strict alternatives because you want, people to use your things and you want exposure, right? Okay, so that's true. All right, so funneling this into, obviously, that's a big part of digital citizenship and making sure that you're properly using intellectual materials in the way that you're allowed to and the way that you should be using them. And part of that also refers to, a big part of that is written work, right? And making sure that you always cite your sources. That part falls into the plagiarism portion of this stuff and how important that is. So, again, we're focusing pretty heavily on that in DGL because it is important, and you don't want to be accused of plagiarism. In an academic sense, you could fail a class or get kicked out of a school for doing it, for example. Those might be some ramifications of it. There might be different ramifications, but that's something naturally that plagiarism, meaning that you always have to provide a source. So you hear me harping on that, saying, did you provide a source? Citing references, exactly. Doesn't have to be formal like APA, unless it's required of you, or if you're trying to get published in maybe a journal or some kind of publication, then yeah, you would want to use a professional style of citation like APA, but you'll cover that later too, and you're starting with your English class, so you'll be talking about that in a couple weeks. Yeah, so how to formally cite like that. But, and I know I showed you guys how you could actually do it from like EBSCOhost or LexisNexis by clicking on the citation link and generating that and just copying and pasting that code, and then you're okay. So you're covered then. You can't be, accused of plagiarism if you have a citation, if you cite your references, as Troy mentioned. So that's ultra important as well. And so anytime you're publishing information, if you take information from another source, even if you're summarizing information or you're just using a little bit of it that you learned somewhere else, you need to cite that source. You need to cite that original information. And saying something like this information was retrieved from the following source and putting a link to it is fine, because you have given credit where credit's due in that case. So you're good to go in that situation. And then also naturally citing other types of multimedia material too, like video and images. A lot of people don't realize that you have to cite them as well. So anything you use that you didn't create needs to be cited. So always err on that side that, hey, you know what, I put this citation, I gave the original creator credit, and you're good, as long as you were allowed to use the material. And we'll talk more about that next week, and you'll get into specifics with that down the road. All right, so relating all of this interesting information into this week's assignment, 3.6, which naturally is your main assignment this month, is, let's see if I'm pulling up the right version here. Okay. Yes, 10 hours. That's right. Okay, yes, this is the right version. That's what I thought. Okay. So for your assignment this week, your main assignment, relating these elements of digital citizenship is what we're doing to a historical event that occurred that was a tragic event recently here in U.S. history. Oh my, this keeps getting larger. Let's see. Okay. All right. So we're going to explore how these elements of digital citizenship related to a tragic event, again, that happened not too far, actually last year, and that was the Boston Marathon bombing. So you are going to look at explore the actions that are required to be proactive global digital citizenship and investigate those different elements like digital ethics and so forth that are required to be a responsible digital citizen. And the things I mentioned too today, like even with intellectual property, that's being a responsible digital citizen if you use these things properly. Proper communications and the ability to communicate information using a variety of digital technologies. You'll be talking about that. And you'll be applying digital literacy tools and techniques to completing this assignment. So you'll actually be using a Web 2.0 online presentation tool in order to complete this assignment. So we'll talk about some ideas of what tools you can use in a few minutes. So I'm very open on what tool you use, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But back to the topic at hand before we cover what tools you might want to use. This is serious stuff with people just being able to go on the internet at any time and put information out there. It can do a lot of damage. It can be very hurtful to people or businesses. And oftentimes people do things without thinking. But, this can be very serious in its effects. And then, of course, the flip side of that is that certainly lots of positive occurs. So we want you to look at both sides as they relate to this tragic event that happened in 2013, which was the Boston Marathon bombing. So you're going to be researching this event and detailing the digital tools that were used. Now, you can relate this to events that happened before, during, and after, or you could focus on, maybe two areas, let's say, like maybe during and after more than before, let's say, depending on what direction you want to take. And you're going to explain and explore how the elements of digital citizenship impacted this historical event. And I'll give you a hint on that. Lots of people came forward when they were looking for the suspects, right? Yes, you can access GoToTraining via iPad, Troy. Yeah, and phone, as a matter of fact, a smartphone. So, and other tools, other types of what do you call them? Tablets and things. Oh, is it fading in and out? What about for everybody else? Is it fading in and out? Really? Well, hopefully the archive will be good. I don't know why it's doing that. A little, and then I come right back. Interesting. So, well, I hear my computer kind of chugging along, trying to keep up. So my computer seems to be getting old and slowing down. So I think I'm going to have to take it to. I don't know if it's a go-to issue but I've noticed sometimes it's taking a lot longer to do things. So I think I need to pay a visit to the good folks at IT to see what's up with my computer. So I'll actually mention that too. So I'll try to talk a little louder for you guys. Is this volume good? Okay, good. So if there's anything that you don't get from this, do come back and visit the archive, okay, guys? So if there's parts that fade in and out, because the recording itself should be good because that's being done, here on my end, the recording. So it should be good. And if not, I'll check it after I process it, and I will upload a different version if it's choppy with the volume. So thanks for letting me know that, you guys. Okay, so again, you're going to be exploring the different tools, the elements of digital citizenship, and the effects, both positive and negative, of this tragic historical event that happened. And you're going to focus on the elements of digital citizenship and the way that those things occurred and took place. So again, citing research is always extremely important, citing your sources. So you may want to use Diigo to help you collect your resource and then cite it by just adding that Diigo link to show where your sources are and what they are. You need a minimum of 4 different research sources. So in other words, you need a minimum of 4 sources. You can get them from any area. Now, because you're looking at an event that was recent in nature, I'd recommend, and because it did gain such extreme publicity, I would look to news sites as reputable sources. I'd look to social media. Maybe you're going to use tools like Facebook and Twitter and say how those were utilized as part of this with digital tools. So think of the tools and technologies that were used, okay? And then go to those directly for sources. You can do search engine. You can use search engines. You can go directly to the sources like Twitter, for example, and do a search. You could go directly to like CNN, for example, and do a search. So you need a minimum of 4 different sources for your presentation. So you also need to cite those sources always, as we mentioned. And this keeps flipping around here. Okay, and you need to either do like a reference slide in the presentation or put them in Diigo and use the link to Diigo. I think using Diigo makes it easier because you can save your sources there right away and just provide that link to Diigo in the presentation. I think that's the easiest route. But if you'd Diigo is great for that. But if you'd rather add them like to a reference slide, that's fine too. So you're not required to use Diigo this time around, but we wanted you guys to be in the habit of collecting resources and then citing them. So again, that might be your easiest route for doing that. So once you've completed your research, you're going to create an online presentation, and you can either use Google Drive or OneDrive. Okay, so that would be drive.google.com or OneDrive Live.com. So either Microsoft's OneDrive or Google Drive. So because you need to create a presentation, I would recommend using either Diigo's presentation tool or PowerPoint from OneDrive. So it needs to be web-based, though. It needs to be a Web 2.0 presentation tool. So you see here right now, right on requirements, it says online presentation. Yeah, so Google Slides, that's what it's called. Yep, that's what I meant. Thanks, Joshua. And so it needs to be an online presentation, not just a presentation. So using PowerPoint on your computer will not meet the requirements. It needs to be PowerPoint on OneDrive if you choose to use PowerPoint. Now, I'm totally cool with you guys using a different presentation tool as long as it's online. So if you wanted to use like eMaze or Prezi or Powtoons or something like that, you're more than welcome to use one of those. Some instructors don't allow you to do that, but I do. So if you want to use an alternate presentation tool, that's fine. And if you're not sure if it's okay, you can message me and I'll let you know. I said, well, I'm not sure which order I said, but I know I said eMaze, I said Prezi, and I said Powtoons, I think was the last one I said. I think those were the 3 I mentioned. Powtoons, Powtoons. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at it. Powtoons is part of, you can add it right to Google Drive, and I think it's on my, you know what, I'm just going to go right to Google Drive. How about that? All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment here. And I'll show you guys what that is real fast. You're welcome. And okay, so when you get into Google Drive and you you normally click create, right, to start your presentation if you were just using Google's presentation tool right here. Okay, and you just click that, and it works much like PowerPoint, you guys know. My Netflix queue. Yeah, I actually watched Netflix in a while. I got the Amazon Fire Stick, and it's great. So I've been watching all different kinds of things, but I've been watching them through the Fire Stick, but I've been mainly focusing on Hulu and Amazon Prime lately, but of course I'm still a big fan of Netflix. Okay, so all right, so when you come into create here, you'll see that I've got more than just the normal things that are in the Google Drive, right? So I've got lots of stuff, Powtoons being one of them. So right here you have a little link that, I don't know, it's not that noticeable to me, but right there is where it is. It says connect more apps. Yeah, let's check that one out. So it says connect more apps. So you want to click that in order to get Powtoons or any others that you might want. So if you click that connect more apps, and they're not all free, I'd recommend, just getting free ones for class. But anyway, so here you go. Most of them are free. And you've got, you name it, sky's the limit of different kind of apps that you can use. So it's awesome. So, of course, if you wanted Powtoons, you could just type that in, Powtoons, and search for it. And there you go. And then you just click connect, and it will download it right into your drive, your apps there that are in Google Drive, which is awesome. So if you want to take a look at that real fast, what that's like, let me hold on one second. Don't want any student assignments to pop up here in my Powtoons here. Feedback. Okay. So 1 minute. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go to their main site here. So that's how you get it, just by choosing Connect More Apps in in your Google Drive. So here's, yeah, Go Animate would be good. Absolutely. Just make sure you have enough content, and that, you might want to, like, in that case, you might want to, like, read a script into it if you don't have, like, the real estate on the screen in order to put your text to explain what you're talking about, which I'm fine with you talking about it as long as I'd turn in your script too, which would be good. Okay, so see how all these cool templates? Yeah. So, you name it, really good animations and things with them. So this one I really like. And then, of course, you can customize these to whatever level, just like all of these other online tools. So let's look at a little example here of one. So it's loading it right now, as you can see. So you see how you could just plug in, your information, and you can change any of it. So you can really customize these, which is great, And you could choose, to customize everything from the music to what you put in it to the way the fonts look, to, anything. So you guys see the, nice animations and things. So like those animations in this template are already built in. But again, you could change that, but you can see how it's really nice presentation. So tons, see this? Tons and tons, right, of different tools, and you can see the different categories over here. All right, so that is Powtoons, and again, that's free. Now, there's, like with all of these, you have upgraded versions that you could, if you wanted to use them in the future in your business, You could upgrade them and pay money to have, maybe like the Powtoon logo removed, for example. You don't need to do that for school. But if you wanted to keep using these tools and use them in your job or your business, you'd be able to do that and like remove if you upgraded. But for school, I wouldn't pay out that money. Okay. So let's see. Jabari's saying that just to mention, you can make your presentation on the desktop in PowerPoint and then upload your slides to Google Docs. Yes, you can. And he's saying that he says that because the online PowerPoint doesn't allow you to do everything you can on the desktop version. Okay, and that's a good point, and I don't mind if you do that. You definitely can. And even with like Prezi, you could create a PowerPoint on your desktop and upload it to Prezi and then customize it there. So, yep, you can definitely integrate both sides instead of just working from the cloud solely. Okay. So back to the requirements, and that's a good tip. Back to the requirements for the presentation. You need, obviously, your name and your student number, like all your assignments. You need your research about digital citizenship. So think of the 9 elements of digital citizenship and the impact of digital tools used in the event, including links and information about the sources, naturally. You need supported statements and citations from at least 4 credible sources about how digital tools and technologies impacted this historical event. I'll give you guys a hint too on the negative side, which obviously you could think of lots of negative with that situation, but I'll show you something specifically as an example. And you're creating, again, an online presentation, so it needs to be a web-based presentation tool. Obviously, once you're done, you want to upload it to FSO under 3.6. And make sure you have a working link to your online presentation. And also, make sure that your presentation is shareable. So whatever online tool you're using, make sure you click share and change it from private to anyone with the link or whatever it says as far as the sharing settings. Change it from private so that I can see your assignment. Very important. I can't stress that enough because it's going to delay the grading if it's private and I can't get to it. So make sure that you've changed that setting to sharing it with anyone with the link. All right, everybody good on that? Okay, good. And what did I just mention that I forgot that I said I was going to show you guys just a moment ago? What was that? Oh, the negative, right? An example of a display and with a digital display and lots of digital tools that would have been used in this case from this. So this would be an example of negativity here in this situation. Let's see. So, all right, Rolling Stone magazine and cover. He was on the cover. Okay, so I'm going to just search right from Google for, here it is. Okay, so right here, we all know, what is Rolling Stone typically associated with? Rolling Stone magazine, rock stars and the like, right? So a lot of people were upset that Rolling Stone used, and put him on the cover, and, it kind of portrays him to be like a rock star, right? Somebody cool and famous. And so a lot of people felt that was, negative use of this type of technology, digital technology, and putting his picture on the cover here, obviously using lots of digital tools like Photoshop and then the digital version of the magazine and all of that. Yeah. So, many people were up in arms about that. Yeah. So not a good, not a good use of, digital technologies here. And clearly, maybe not the best, maybe with digital ethics, maybe not the best choice there, right, for Rolling Stone to make. Certainly got them lots of publicity, but, that's negative, naturally, of the negative type. So that would be an example of something you might want to look up. But, so do lots of research and see. No, you can still use it, but obviously, use and explain it and use some different examples too. So, but this would be a really good example for sure, and something, interesting for you guys to look into naturally. Okay. All right. So that is assignment 3.6. So I'm going to open up the forum for questions now. If anybody has any questions, you can either type them in or raise your hand as usual. Okay, I see one hand up. Joshua. Okay, Joshua, I'm unmuting you. Okay.
All right. So I just wanted to ask to clarify, and I'll go through and read the instructions for sure on this assignment. But when you say four sources, are you talking about also including four statements, both positive and negative, or is there a certain amount of statements we have to make, but using four sources?
Okay, that's a great question. You need four sources minimally. So you could have six sources, you could have, more, but a minimum of four sources. And you might want to break that down. Maybe use two that highlight the positive and two that highlight the negative, for example. Or maybe you want to use
Hmm.
a couple sources for events that took place during and after. And maybe you would want to use like one that focused on the positive of events during, um, and then events after, for example, both in the positive
And
and negative. So you can break that down however you want, just as long as you have a minimum of four sources for this. I think four sources is a very, very, small amount to use for this assignment. I think it should be more like between 6 and 8. But if you can get a lot of information from just four sources, then by all means, you've met the requirement. So, but you can steer that in any direction you
and
want.
so
Go ahead.
Okay, and so after you get a source,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, and so after you get a source, and you have that all ready laid out, do
Mhm.
you explain the source, like what their negative or positive examples of the digital citizenship in a paragraph form, or do you break it down in bullets, or how would you want that?
Well, that's up to you, but you definitely need to explain it. So, probably in paragraph form would be the most descriptive, right? Complete sentences in
Right,
paragraph
that's what I
form.
was thinking.
Yeah, or you could have maybe an introductory paragraph, let's say, and up top, and then have like bulleted lists that, like according to CNN, such and such happened, and Twitter was used to disseminate this type of information in the following that had the following positive effects, and you could put a list like that. So it's up to you, but certainly you could get more information on a slide with paragraph form versus bullets, but you could intermingle the.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, and if
Yeah.
you are using, you're welcome. And do you have any other question with that? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope, that was it. Thank
Okay,
you.
you're welcome, Joshua. Okay, and that was a good question. So, and again, someone had asked earlier if you could narrate or use a tool like Go Animate, which is fine. So you'd be narrating in that case more than likely to get enough information in the presentation. So in that case, you could certainly narrate. You could certainly have a script and talk. And then if you're narrating, like if you're narrating your PowerPoint, for example, and you're talking, you could maybe have bullets on the page instead of like full sentences because you're talking about the events and what occurred. So you could mix it up too like that, or you could just use one or the other. And phrase of the day, very nice. Phrase of the day is digital ethics. Thank you for reminding me, Joshua. Phrase of the day is digital ethics. So that's the term or the phrase of the day, digital ethics. So make sure you plug that into my attendance form. I'll go ahead and give you guys the link to my attendance form, even though you know it's the same for all of them. You're welcome since you're here. So if you want to fill that out now and get it submitted, that's good. All right. And, as I mentioned, I'll just show you an example here. Like if I went to Twitter, I could go straight to Twitter and do research, right? If I want to say, well, this was a digital tool used, and I could just type in Boston Marathon bombing, right? And right? And I could see all kinds of tweets, right? I never know what might pop up. But anyway, I could see all kinds of tweets. Oh, that's didn't come out the way I wanted that. All right, so maybe I want to fine tune it and say something like suspects here, right? And so, from the legal standpoint, talking about, here's okay, so you can see how both, good and bad could be displayed here. CVS Evening News with the jury selection. I'll tell you, lots of people stepped in to help find the suspects in digital ways. So that would be a good direction maybe that you want to take. Okay. All right. So be thorough and creative in your research and come up with interesting ideas. But remember, you're going to be highlighting the elements of digital citizenship and how they played a part in both the positive and negative side of the Boston Marathon bombing tragedy. Okay? Good? All right. So that's good. And that might be something you want to look into, Joshua. And tons of different, digital images floating around regarding this. But yeah, do your research and decide which directions you want to take it, but definitely focus on both sides, positive and negative. All right. So do we have any other questions? Joshua, you're welcome. Was your hand up for what you just typed in? I just looked up again at the list. Or do you want me to unmute you again? Which I'll be glad to do if you want. No, we don't have quizzes and tests and good old DGL. Okay, that's no problem. We'll put it down for you. Well, I was going to, but now some. Okay, Kevin's got his hand up. So I'm going to, go ahead and put your hand down, Joshua. And then Kevin, you're unmuted now. You're welcome. Hi, Kevin. You're unmuted. Or maybe Kevin had his hand up accidentally. Okay. Kevin, you can talk or type if you want, but maybe Kevin's hand's up accidentally. So I'll go ahead and mute him again. Okay. So do we have any other questions before we close out? Okay. Well, then on that note, guys, thanks for your participation today. We had a great session. We'll go ahead and close out today's lab. I will have this processed and up on the community discussion board by tomorrow. So make sure that you watch it. If there's any parts where the volume was fading out in the middle around there, if you need to review any of that. So I hope you guys have a great evening, and make sure to remember to get that initial post in for 3.4. And I will see you guys online. Thanks for joining. Yeah. Yeah, I always add in the extra time, but it's been a while since it took that long. All right. So thanks for joining, you guys. Have a great evening.